There's some of those crystal balls, they don't come through. Ohio State had a few of those over the weekend.
Oh, they did have a few. What a great transition that was, Austin. Very good job on that. Yeah, you did get a couple of commits over the weekend. Damari Simeon, 4-star defensive lineman out of Richland, New Jersey, Austin. 2026 class, 6'3", 275 pounds from St. Augustine Prep. He's the number 201 ranked prospect in the composite rankings, 26 defensive linemen. And then you also got Cam Brickle on the defensive front as well. He's also in the 2026 class out of IMG Academy, of course, probably the most famous high school for pumping out college talent and NFL talent down there in Bradenton. 3-star in the composite ranking, 537, number 62 defensive lineman, but he weighs in at 6'2", 305. So those were the commitments that Ohio State got. As you had just mentioned, they lost out on a couple who had been previously predicted and crystal balled to then go Ohio State. One player in general actually ended up going to Michigan in his commitment. Is it panic time for Ohio State on the recruiting trail? Because I don't know how you feel about it, how Berm feels about it. I did read his article that he put out today or yesterday. I forget which day when I was reading that, but did read his article just kind of addressing the recruiting situation at Ohio State and how they are playing all in by the rules, and that maybe nobody else in college football is doing that. You still have a top 5 class, all right? You still still have a top 5 class. You just got 2 commits yesterday. I tend to think it's not panic time because Ohio State has always recruited pretty well. I know it is a different era in college football right now, and it will be fascinating to see here come tomorrow when July 1st kicks in, you get the House settlement, all this kind of goes through what it looks like kind of in the future. But, what's Berm saying about panic time?
I don't know that he and I completely agree on this because, he lives primarily in the recruiting world, and I live primarily on the team side. And I see we had the same conversation. It feels like to me, I'm having deja vu for 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. You have the first free-for-all era and teams and programs winning recruitments solely by dropping the biggest bag of cash.
Texas A&M was the first one that came to my mind.
Texas A&M, Miami, and Michigan State would be the 3 that I remember there being recruitments. They went down to the wire. Ohio State thought they were in good position, and they just didn't match the highest offer. But Texas A&M, to your point, Beamer, well, 1 year later, 6 months later, a lot of the promised money did not materialize. Or if they gave them a check, they bounced. And then the players bounced into the portal immediately. And so that was not a sustainable model. And Ohio State had to suffer through some short-term pain and some teeth gnashing and frustration. They weren't winning battles that in every other situation, every other year, they would probably win. But I struggle to find the right word for it. Prudent, patient, cautious, conservative. Some of them apply, some of them don't. I don't know the perfect word for it. But they certainly know where the line is and where they are comfortable operating.
Yeah.
And they don't cross it. And it's not because they can't afford to. They definitely could. But we hear this a lot, and I don't take it as silver lining or justification. When Ryan Day and Mark Pantoni or any of the coaches say, if the first thing that you care about in your recruitment is how much you're going to pay, you're not going to fit in to the Brotherhood, you're not going to fit into the Woody Hayes Athletic Center.
And they will openly and adamantly tell you that.
And I believe that that's true. And I think there's also 5 years of evidence that the approach that they have taken, both with NIL, roster retention, transfer portal activity, the players that they brought in, it's borne out. They've got a nice shiny trophy in the Bigs lobby right now for the national championship. Their way works. Now they're in a period where the rules are shifting. But at the same time that they're moving and the rules of engagement are changing, Ross Bjork is involved in what that's going to look like for the CSC.
Very heavily involved.
Going to determine what the penalties look like, what the rules are, how that applies for the House settlement. So you can't have it both ways. Ohio State can't go past where the line is and set the rules behind themselves.
Yeah, no, they can't do that.
So that
they could.
They could, but that wouldn't make a lot of sense, and you wouldn't make a lot of friends in this process. And you'd say, well, this isn't about making friends. It's about winning championships. Well, I don't think that the overarching principle has to change. Yeah, Ohio State is going to fund the football program at one of the top 5 levels in the country.
Every year, year in, year out.
That's not going to change. The development process is not going to change. The platform for NIL, the outside businesses that are involved, that's not going to change. And if in the short term, other programs are making financial promises that are outlandish and well beyond what Ohio State is willing to pay, and you lose that recruitment, fine, so be it. Maybe those same players are going to be back available in 6 months. I'm thinking right now, the programs that seem to be crossing that line at a level that it is not sustainable, like USC.
Mm-hmm. We just saw that with Luke Wafel a couple of weeks ago.
And Ohio State was pretty confident when it went down to the wire that, all right, he is going to recognize the situation at USC. He's going to trust, and Ohio State will win that battle. And they didn't at that exact time because USC just kept adding more and more money to the pile. Well, there's not an endless supply. This is not a buffet. You can't just keep going back and finding more and more money. At some point, you actually have to put some food on the tray for this kid or for 30 other kids that they have committed. Not all 30 can go there, and USC can't afford to pay them all. So
not at the rate at which they're going right now, because if you look at their recruiting class, they have 30 commits.
Yeah, it's not
in this class.
You can't.
And they're promised every one of them, I'm guessing, over market value and what other schools were willing to pay.
And you can't just say, well, USC is going to step up and they're going to pay that because they need to give Lincoln Riley a chance to win. Well, okay. Starting tomorrow, there's a salary cap. There is a roster limit. You don't have a bottomless pit. Now, they have been able to front load a lot of these deals, and that's what we're seeing other programs do heading into July 1st. But Ohio State's already done that with their roster. Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs, I'm telling you, they're not playing for free.
They're probably not playing for very cheap either, I can't imagine.
So you have to factor all of that in, and I think allocating your resources toward your current roster, I think, is still the better model than paying up front for a 17-year-old.
I 1,000% agree with that, and that's why I'm here to say it's okay. I mean, you could lose out commits. It's recruiting. It's recruiting. They used to have an entire day of people throwing hats down and putting hats on and disrespecting teams and the whole process. You don't know. You can't get inside the mind of an 18-year-old kid. It's tried and it's true, and it's tested the way that they're operating right now. If you want to panic, that's fine. I'm just in the belief in the camp of these guys have it figured out. You have Mark Pantoni, who's the best general manager in all college football, that the way that Ohio State is attacking their recruiting strategy right now is probably going to be the way that everybody is doing it 5 years from now.
And that's not to say that Mark Pantoni or Ryan Day or Ross Bjork over the weekend were like, don't worry, this is cool. We like losing. They don't feel
Right.
that way. Like
Right.
they are frustrated, but you have to balance that frustration with a long-term vision. And my personal opinion, based on watching it happen for the last 5 years, is that Ohio State sees and understands that long-term view better than anybody else in the country.
So they lost out on Landon Barnes. He committed to Ole Miss. And then they lost out on Carter Meadows, who committed to Michigan. Both of those guys, defensive ends. Like, it's just,
The position in the programs are not what you want.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's obviously not when Michigan, and you've got your guy Lane Kiffin knocking on the door for a college football playoff appearance too. So you did get 2 commits, all right? You didn't get the 4-pack that maybe you were expecting, but I tend to believe that everything is just fine in Buckeye recruiting land. What's the roster cost nowadays in college football? We'll get into that coming up in 2 minutes. It's the